Welcome back to the talk show, where rock and roll has always been our business. This is the Allan Handelman Show.
It is great to have you back. Daniel Estulin, we've had him on before. I like this guy. He's got a lot of guts. He's brave. He's an investigative journalist and the author. Kind of specializes in investigating the Bilderberg Group, that mysterious by invitation, conference only kind of thing where elites go to. Well, he's the guy. And his last book was called The True Story of the Bilderberg Group. His new book is pretty explosive. It's called Shadow Masters. I haven't had a chance to really digest it all. I just got some of this, but it's going to make an incredible movie. It is about governments around the world that cooperate with drug dealers and terrorists for mutual benefit. Daniel Estulin, it's great to have you on live from Spain. Hi.
Good evening or good afternoon, whatever it is where you are. Yes, sir, indeed. Thank you so much for having me again on your show.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, we will take some calls later, too. I want to let everyone know. Let's give out the number, 866-482-1011, 866-482-1011. But I think we have a little digesting to do here. This is a big story. Well, just give us the summary of what this is all about. As a follow-up to your last book, and now talking about the Shadow Masters, what did you come across? You start at the beginning here.
Well, I just basically go down the rabbit's hole, and I uncover some pretty nasty characters working together. The government, the United States government, European governments, intelligence agencies around the world, working together with drug dealers, terrorists, gun pushers, all of them doing basically the same thing, killing people for profit, for benefit, and in the process making lots of enemies and very few friends. And one part of this investigation of this book took me all the way to Thailand, to Bangkok, where I was investigating probably the story of the 21st century, the story of the man called Viktor Bout. They call him the Merchant of Death, the alleged worst, biggest, and most terrifying gun runner in the history of the world.
Yeah, tell us about that. Give us some of the background on that. That's a fascinating story. Go ahead.
Well, I'm sure everyone has seen the film. The film called The Lord of War with Nicolas Cage. I think it was shot and aired back in 2005, and it was based on the life of Viktor Bout, this alleged merchant of death. Only when I went to Bangkok and I started investigating the story myself, I realized that the entire thing was a charade, smoke and mirrors, basically put together by the United States government, some very unscrupulous United Nations inspectors, very, very important, well-known, fabulously wealthy American journalists, all of them working together. Again, it's an incredibly big facade, and behind this facade is an amazing story of a man who's basically an expendable patsy, another Oswald, put in prison by the United States government, who is fighting extradition right now from Thailand. But the story is amazing. It reads like a Hollywood script. You have, this merchant of death, Viktor Bout, whom the United States government allegedly has 15 years worth of evidence to convict him and put him away for about 300 years. Except in Bangkok, you have the DEA agent in charge, a man by the name of Derek Odney, offering $20 million to former Russian nuclear intelligence officer to get out of the way. You have Bout's co-conspirator being kidnapped by the United States government. You have fake letters being written by the American government on behalf of the Colombian Foreign Ministry. You have American witnesses showing up to court with zero evidence. Again, it's an amazing story. And then last but not least, the man who is Bout's second lawyer actually works for the DEA. Now tell me if it's not a Hollywood bestseller.
Now, this is in recent times. How far back does this go? I know you mentioned names like Oliver North and as part of these Shadow Masters. So how give us a little history how far back this goes.
Well, the story actually goes back to the beginning of 1990s when the Soviet Union fell apart. Viktor Bout, who was a junior lieutenant and a translator working in Mozambique in Africa, instead of going back to Russia and working for $10 a month salary as a junior lieutenant, he basically stayed in Africa because his passion has always been airplanes. He bought a couple of beat-up clunker Antonov airplanes, for the price of a Mercedes, about $250,000 a piece. And he basically started running a cargo business. Between 1991 and 1993, he was transporting ostrich eggs, ostriches, zebras, gladiolas from South Africa, where he was buying flowers for $2 a piece and selling them in Dubai for $100 a piece, elephants, anything that needed to be moved, including guns. He was moving it. But then again, gun running is not illegal. It's a very legal business. And in Africa, everyone does it, from governments to individuals. And again, I'm not condoning it. It's actually one of the reasons I started the investigation of Bout, is because how strongly I feel about people using guns to kill people, especially in the continent in Africa. But then what happened, this is an amazing turnaround, is that as the entire African continent was ablaze in wars, out of the 53 countries, 32 of them were local and regional wars, all the Western cargo carriers pulled out, and all the Africans, I'm talking about 1 billion people on the continent, were left to their own devices. So they had no way of getting, clothes. They had no way of getting medicine, no getting food. And Viktor Bout and his kamikaze band of merry men, basically ex-Soviet pilots who also were out of the job, they took over the entire market. And between 1993 and 1997, Bout controlled 90% of the entire African cargo carrier business. That's a mega monopoly, much bigger than Microsoft has ever had. And then when the wars began to subside in Africa in the late 1990s, suddenly the Western corporations found themselves in a situation where the entire African continent was controlled by this, pickle-eating Ruski by the name of Viktor Bout. So then they came up with this plan to basically destroy his credibility, get him out of the way, because needless to say, Africa is prime continent, not only for oil, not only for diamonds, but also for intelligence operations, for destroying nation states, for replacing unfavorable leaders with your own patsies. And needless to say, it doesn't do anyone any good, especially if you're the CIA or the Mossad, or the MI6, to have a Ruski there, supported by the Russian government. So they just decided literally to get rid of him. That was initially how the entire Bout operation got going.
Mm-hmm. Wow, it's interesting. By the way, as you listen to him talk, the interesting story, you might remember his father was a dissident who fought for freedom and freedom of speech, and he was jailed and tortured by the KGB. So you're a Russian expatriate, right?
Exactly. The American government has tried, to lead my feet the fact that, Viktor Bout and I are great buddies. We're not buddies at all. We have never been buddies, and we could never, ever be buddies. As a matter of fact, anyone who has anything to do with the KGB are pretty much, on my not on my Christmas list. But the point is that I am from the Soviet Union, and I am an investigator. And when I started investigating the truth behind the entire Bout scenario, I realized what an amazing story it is, and how so many people have gone so far out of the way to perjure themselves, such as Douglas Farrer, for example, a very famous journalist who had written a book called The Merchant of Death. That's where the term comes from. That's why they call Viktor Bout the Merchant of Death. Or he testified twice in front of the United States Congress, and in my book, I destroy his testimony and show it for what it is. He perjured himself, and in the real world, that man would go to prison, except, of course, we don't live in the real world.
866-482-1011. And I again, for people, I may be going over old material because we talked about the Bilderbergers more on your last book, but for people who think this is just some fictitious name that conspiracy theory people like to bring up, you say, hey, they're the real deal, and you name names. Why don't we go back a little bit and go over that, and then we'll talk about it and tie it into the Shadow Masters in this new book that is really scary. And you aren't going to name names. You're going to recognize. But talk about this. Bilderbergers to a lot of people is just some fiction, people's imagination going wild.
Well, I don't know how far you are along in the Shadow Masters, but it's certainly, again, as in the Bilderberg book, I do name names. That's one of the strengths of my book. I don't say them. We're always used to people saying they did this, the bankers, the powerful elites, the men behind the curtain. Well, in my books, one of the reasons, it had so much credence and popularity to my Shadow Masters and the Bilderberger book is that actually not only name names, but actually show photographs. There's over 120 pages of photographs and documents in Bilderberg, and over 120 pages and photographs in the Shadow Masters. In the world of international finance, speaking of what Bilderberg is and is not, There are those who steer the events and those who react to the events. Now, while the latter are often better known, they're greater in numbers and seemingly more powerful. True power rests with the former, and at the center of this global financial system, and the financial oligarchy represented by the Bilderberg Group. Now, the idea behind all of the Bilderberger meetings is to create what they themselves call the aristocracy of purpose between European and North American elites on the best ways to manage the planet. Now, a second ago, we talked about conspiracy theories and the fact that people don't believe it. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason people don't believe in secret societies controlling the world is that theirs is a Cartesian fantasy world in which the isolated intentions of some individuals, not the dynamics of social processes, shape the course of history as the movement of evolving ideas and themes over successive generations. Now, Bilderberg isn't a society. There are no conspiracies, even though a lot of crazy people out there, with their infantile fantasies see it as such. Also, it's not a monolith, meaning that no group of people, I don't care how powerful they are, sit around the table holding hands, staring at a crystal ball in a dark room, planning the world's domination. It is a meeting of people who represent a certain ideology. Now, that ideology isn't one world government, new world order, as so many people, again, would like you to believe. And I've seen people tell me, one world government, man, they take out a dollar bill and meaningfully show, the pyramid, and they kind of...
Right, yeah, that's right. That's what you think.
They kind of wink at you, meaningfully. I have no idea what they're talking about. It's not about one world government. It's about one world company limited. It's a concept of corporations one day giving orders to governments. It's about creating pan-European and world economic unions. It's just another word for globalization, which is just another word for empire, and that's what it is. So when you take the conspiracy, out of the historical meaning of what Bilderberg represents, suddenly the entire thing is very, very simple to digest.
Good, well put. All right, let's take some calls here. 866-482-1011. Your questions. We'll take a break here. His latest book is called Shadow Masters, and he's talking, in fact, he refers to them a bit like vicious orchestrators of war, terrorism, and grand-scale theft, and he names names. Hear all sides of the story, and you make up your own mind. The new book is called Shadow Masters from Daniel Estulin. We're talking to him live right now from Spain. Let me give you his website, danielestulin.com, and that's ESTULIN, danielestulin.com. We'll have it, of course, on our websites with a whole lot more detail. 866-482-1011. Let's start taking calls. And let's start with John. John, good to have you on. You're on, John. Hello, John. You're on,
Alan.
Hey, doing fine. Go ahead.
Daniel, Alan, I'm hearing about this concept of the Bilderberger, and it smacks of conspiracy. And, well, I guess we cannot deny that there is business profits, greed, and corruption, and that's been pervasive throughout history. And now, if I understand Daniel, there's a group of heads of state, politicians, and banking criminals. Well, I guess you could call them all criminals that get together for an annual powwow. Do I understand that correctly?
Appreciate the call, John. Go ahead and respond to that, Daniel.
I didn't hear the question, but yes, the people who participate in Bilderberg conferences, this is what used to be called the former NATO alliance nations. You have the prime ministers of all European nations. You have the prime minister of Canada who attends Bilderberg meetings. The sitting president of the United States never goes because every second of his time is well accounted for, but he's well represented by others who go on his behalf. You have 50, 60 top CEOs of leading corporations in the Western world, members of this organization as well. The leading representatives of the media cartels, the New York Times, the Washington Post, etc. You have the European royalty, which is a very important part of the Bilderberg organization, is involved as well. And you have European commissioners, and all in all, you're looking at about 120 members, needless to say, all the key banking institutions represented, International Monetary Fund, World Bank, Federal Reserve. Now, the Bilderberg organization, they were founded through the French synarchist movement, which itself is a Marxist esoteric secret society founded way back in the 1770s. And the synarchist movement was founded as the oligarchy's counterattack on the principles upon which the United States of America was built. Now, Bilderberg, it's a medium of bringing together financial institutions, which are the world's most powerful and most predatory financial interests. It is not the key secret society. It's not the evil eye. It's not the most powerful organization in the world. But they're a very key ingredient because they involve all these organizations and individuals I mentioned before who form part of this global juggernaut. Obviously do not work for the people of the world, but represent very special interests, and Bilderberger Society just happened to be one of them.
The last caller used the word conspiracy. This is no conspiracy. You're trying to stay away from that whole genre because what you're talking about is something you say is real. It is happening. It's not a theory.
Well, I spent 2.5 years researching or toiling, or whatever you want to call it, in the National Library in Florence. In the late 1990s. After the National Archives in the United States and the British Museum in England, it is probably the most important research institute for older information, middle 14th, 15th century. And I can tell you that what's today's called the Bilderberg Group, 800 years ago already existed. It was called the Venetian Black Nobility. And again, the idea hasn't changed in this entire time. The idea is destroy nation-state republics and basically create corporations that literally give orders to governments. But the idea of destroying nation-state republics, constitutions, general welfare, again, as the concept represented and talked about in the preamble of the Constitution of the United States, that's what these people are after.
You document, and I want you to elaborate on this, that President George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, was working with the International Monetary Fund, deliberately set up circumstances for a massive transfer of Russians' wealth into secret U.S. and offshore bank accounts. Talk a little bit about that, and you also bring up names like David Rockefeller. So talk about the connections that we all can recognize, names we know.
I'll give you a couple of examples, going back to Bilderberg, and then we'll get into the Shadow Masters, because, again, it's just a continuation. It's, again, going down the rabbit hole, whether the Bilderberg is the planners, the Shadow Masters are the doers. So back in 2002, when the Bilderbergs met in Chantilly, I said that they discussed pushing the oil price from about $18 a barrel at the time to about $100 a barrel by the end of 2007. Well, it hit 100 on the 2nd of January 2008. That's a pretty good for a prediction, especially for those who don't believe in Bilderberg as being a real society, but rather a conspiracy. And then in 2005, when they met in Germany in Rotterdam, they talked about pushing oil price to about $150 a barrel by late August. Now, all of this is all over the internet. I'm not just saying it now, so people can go back and actually see when I made these predictions. If you remember, it hit by late summer, 107.5, and then almost immediately it went down to about 30, something else I called right on the money. Now, that's very easy to explain. For the people who control the world, two nations stand in the way of their one world company limited scheme, China and Russia. Obviously, militarily, Russia is unequal to the United States and NATO, and China is not, but still China is a very powerful adversary. So how do you destroy Chinese economy? We just push oil price through the roof to $150 a barrel because Chinese have no oil to speak of. So anything they make, any trinket they need, they obviously going to need energy, and the cheaper the better. So if you can push the oil price to $150 a barrel, you're destroying their economy and taking money out of their hands. Now, Russia, on the other hand, have a lot of oil to go around. So if you can actually push the price down to about $30 a barrel, you're destroying their economy because suddenly, their energy is worth, or the monies they get for that energy is a fifth of what it was just 6 months ago. So that was the idea behind manipulating the oil price. So going to the Shadow Masters now destabilizing the Russian state became the goal of the Shadow Masters after the collapse of the Soviet Union in December 1991. In other words, the Soviet Union, possessing the world's largest mineral wealth, was to be literally asset stripped. Now, the strategy was intended to topple the country into anarchy to the point Russia could not oppose the United States' military operations designed to secure control of the oil and gas reserves in Central Asia, and obviously to lead the way to controlling the nation. And as I show in the book, unequivocally, numerous prime Western banks, such as the United States Treasury using the Harvard Endowment, Bank of New York, Goldman Sachs, Massachusetts banking giants Fleet Financial and Bank of Boston, looted up to $500 billion in cash out of Russian economy. And obviously also participating was the ubiquitous CIA, whose chief goal was to destroy the Soviet currency. And again, talking about naming names, here is a good example. And then Viktor Bout, the idea of the merchant of death is like, why is he there? On the one hand, you can get him out of Africa, but also on the other, if you can trumpet the idea that no Russian or pickle-eating Ruski, who doesn't matter who he is, could possibly get his hands on all these arms without the help of the government itself, and you can actually link Viktor Bout to nuclear technology being sold to terrorists, you can destroy Russia's standing and credibility in the international community and basically make it another pariah state along the lines of North Korea and Vietnam, which is, again, was another part of the operation. And, in the world of intelligence operations, there are no coincidences. There are well-planned and badly planned operations. The operation to destroy Russia financially without firing a nuclear weapon back in the 1990s was a very well-planned operation. The Viktor Bout operation was and is a fiasco. And one of the reasons is American government, when they were doing their what-if scenarios, simply couldn't fathom that, someone like myself, who has always been interested in secret societies, would get on a plane, go to Thailand, and write a book about Viktor Bout and destroy what American government has been so meticulously putting together for the past 15 years.
Wow. Okay, what a story. We're going to take a break here. We will go to your calls, 866-482-1011, 866-482-1011. You can go to Twitter and tweet your questions. It's Daniel Estulin. DanielEstulin.com is the website.
Stay tuned for more of The Allan Handelman Show.
This is a great product. I love this from the C. Crane Company. Have you ever bought one of those FM transmitters you might find at the auto department at a department store where you try to get audio from your MP3 player to your car on FM? And you get one and it sort of works. It doesn't even get through in many cases the interference. And even if it does, it sounds awful. It's tinny. I mean, if you came to a radio station that sounded like that, you wouldn't listen to it. Well, now all that's changed thanks to this amazing transmitter at the C. Crane Company. It's an FM transmitter. They call it FM Transmitter 2. Number 1 was great, but the FM Transmitter 2 is broadcast quality audio. Yeah, broadcast quality audio. I'll give you the website. You got to check out the reviews. And basically, just a small little thing, real cool, works on batteries, or it has a thing where you can plug it in. And when you do plug it in, no AC hum. But you just put it into your MP3 player, and you're on the air. You pick the frequency that has adjustments for the level, and the clarity is amazing. I use it all the time. If I'm out cutting the grass and I want to have it on my little FM headset, I can listen to the music in full stereo. It's the FM Transmitter 2 at the C. Crane Company, ccradio.com. ccradio.com. Love that. In fact, when you're there, and even if you're not interested in buying anything, just get the catalog, the free catalog, read it. You could do it online, or I'll give you a phone number in just a bit. Here's the price for that FM transmitter, $59.95. That's it, $59.95. I guarantee you're going to love it. Tell your friends about it. Read the reviews. Read about the modifications. It's all on the website, ccradio.com. Here's their phone number. To order a free catalog, to order this device or anything else you see, 800-522-8863. 800-522-8863. One more time, 800-522-8863. And the nice people you talk to, they're going to ask you for a code. How did you hear about it? You just say, Allan.